name is Mars. You can call me MG if you would like, and today I have for you my June wrap-up and July TBR. June, I still read a fair amount of books. I read, I think, 11 books, and that is a good number, but it is less than I normally read, and that's because I spent a lot of time this month focusing on writing. I was editing so many projects and doing brainstorming and all that fun stuff, and I just really lost myself in my stories, so I had less time to read, but I'm not mad about that. A lot of the books that I did read during the month were also ebooks instead of physical books, so editing me is going to have a fun time putting all that together, but I don't have to worry about that now, so let's just get into talking about those books. The first book I picked up was actually a physical book and not an ebook, and that was The Ghost Faces by John Flanagan. This is book 6 in the Brother Band Chronicles. At least it was called the Brother Band Chronicles at first, but starting with this book, the branding is just Brother Band, so it might just be the Brother Band series now. I don't really know, it doesn't really matter. This book had fantasy Native Americans, which is not something that I expected. This is a like a Viking-inspired fantasy. Our main characters are from Scandia, and they're basically Vikings. And in this book, they get caught in a storm and end up sailing across the endless sea, and they discover fantasy North America, I guess, and they meet this group of people, and it wasn't anything fantastic, but it was definitely much better done than I was expecting, and it was kind of funny and kind of sweet. This book has a very beautiful depiction of grief that I wasn't expecting, and overall, it's John Flanagan. I love almost all of his books, so I had a good time. The next 4 books I'm not going to go into too much detail about because I did read them for a vlog, so I will link that down below for you. It was a vlog where I read books that I connected to my D&D character in a couple of different ways, and it was so much fun. So the first book that I read was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I absolutely adored. Then I picked up What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, and I enjoyed this. It wasn't as good as Emily Wilde, but I still had a decent time with it. Then I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which I also loved and was so glad to have loved because it's one of my favorite movies, and I was scared that I wouldn't like the book, but I did. And then the last book I picked up was actually a nonfiction book called The Way Through the Woods on Mushrooms and Morning, and it was a very interesting time, is what we'll say. If you want any more details, go check out my blog. The next book I picked up was Fish Swimming in Dappled Sunlight by Riku Onda, and this is a psychological thriller by a Japanese author that was then translated into English, and I gave this a 10 out of 10. It was so fantastic. I thought it was insanely well written, and I was just glued to my phone because that's where I read my ebooks. I have to keep going, and it was nice and short. I feel like it was a good length for what it was. It didn't draw anything out, and there were so many twists and turns, and not in a okay, where do I take the story now, might as well do this kind of way, but in a very well crafted way, and I definitely will be reading from this author again. Then I had my other physical read for the month, and that was Inferno by Dante Alighieri, the first book in the Divine Comedy. I did not read this whole thing, this gigantic book. No, you can see my bookmark is here, so I've read the first third. I thought about reading Purgatory and Paradise in one swoop, doing the whole trilogy, and then I was maybe not, because that's a lot of dense writing. This version was translated by famous poet, I don't remember which one. If I could open to the page. Longfellow. I was gonna say Wordsworth, and I'm that's not correct. So it was a translation by Longfellow, and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time reading it. It does take a little more brain power than just picking up a regular old book from nowadays, so that's why I didn't read all 3, but I did read the first one and had a great time. The next book I picked up was actually an audiobook, and that was Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, who is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, if you didn't know. And I read this for the Bujo Buddies book club, and it was okay. I felt like it had good ideas, but it got very, very repetitive at times and could have been slimmed down so much just by cutting all that extra nonsense that had already been said. So I didn't love that aspect of it, but there were definitely some really interesting ideas if you are a creative person. Like in this book, she talks about being a writer, so that's kind of a big focus, but it kind of applies to all sorts of creative ideas and like artistry. So if you're that kind of person and you would like some sort of motivational self help book, this might be one to pick up. Okay, I actually forgot that I did have one more physical read for this month, and that was The Starless Sea, which I don't have the dust jacket on because I got this at a used book sale at my local library in May, and the dust jacket is kind of like, grimi's not the right word, but it's also not the wrong word. But I just took the dust jacket off and put it in my closet because I did not want it on this book, because also this is just so beautiful. But if I show you the spine, you can see that this is in fact The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and I had a great time. I also had a weird time because the writing style is like weirdly similar to mine. I feel like if you enjoy Erin Morgenstern's writing style, at least in this book, I have not read her other book, but if you like the writing style of The Starless Sea, you'll probably like the writing style of my books, so check them out if you'd like to. Also, though, the main character, Zachary, feels so much like an alternate version of the person that I was in college. So I graduated college 4 years ago, and I feel like I've changed so much over those 4 years. But the person that I was during my time in college is so similar to the main character of this book. I was reading it and I'm like, this is wacky. But overall, I had a great time reading this. I genuinely loved it. Then I picked up Watership Down by Richard Adams, and this was for the Nostalgia Train book club. And I thought this was a fine book. I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate anything in it. It was definitely a lot tamer than I expected because this is a book about rabbits, and you like go through their lives. They're the main characters and everything. And I had heard that it's like very gory and violent, which like it definitely has those moments, but I was expecting like Warrior Cats level, and I had to DNF Warrior Cats because I could not deal with that level of what was going on. But this book I felt like was done not, how do I say this correctly? It was like done in a different way that was much more palatable to me at least. But like the story itself was perfectly fine. I think it was very middle of the road according to my taste, and I wouldn't have picked it up without the book club, but it was a fine time. And speaking of a fine time, the last book that I read was Baby Love by I.S. Bell. And this is a novella that is sapphic and spooky and deals with like resurrection and stuff. And it is set in the same world as this author's book, Zombabe, which I have not read, but I've been following this author on Instagram for a long time because I love the ideas that they post about. Like all of their little synopses really appeal to me, and the cover art for all of their books is fantastic. But I feel like I maybe should have read Zombabe before reading this one. It says in the beginning of the book that you don't have to do that, but I feel like I might have gotten a lot more out of this if I had, because there's a lot of stuff kind of just thrown at you that I feel like I would have understood more and felt like it was more well explained if I already knew the world. There was a lot of underdeveloped ideas, and like this was less than 100 pages, and I really feel like it could have been better if there had been more length to it and like things were more explained, given a little more time to develop. But overall, it wasn't terrible. I still had a fun time reading it, so if you want something that is spooky and sapphic and just kind of campy, you should check it out. And now we come to the part of the video where I pull my 3 cards to find prompts for books to read in the next month. So we've got my deck here, we'll split it here, sure. And straighten this out. Let's see what the 3 cards are. First one is, ooh, it's the 3 of Beasts. And our second card is the Bard. Ooh, this is a very pretty pink one. I like that a lot. And our third card for the month of July. Ooh, it's beautiful. Oh, it's the Fae. The Fae is the like set of cards where it's something on the cover having to do with like animals and stuff. So like last month I had one of the Fae cards and it was a sea creature on the cover, and that one was giving me so much trouble, but I don't remember what this like the first Fae card is. It's something on the cover, and we're gonna find out, and I'm gonna find a book, but Let me go check out these prompts, find some books, and I will come back to you. Okay, friends, I am back, and I have picked out my books for July, so let's talk about them. The first card I pulled was the Three of Beasts. I kind of fudged this one a little bit because this is a retelling of a classic and has to specifically be like a classic novel. It can't be mythology or fairy tale retelling because those are separate prompts for different cards. So a retelling of a classic novel, and there were a couple of options that I was looking at. The first one that I had put in the slot was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, which is a retelling of The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and I have read The Turn of the Screw, so I'm like, that'd be cool to read. But then I remembered a different book that kind of fudges the prompt a little bit, and that book is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, and this is not necessarily a retelling of any specific classic novel, but it follows the children, specifically I think the daughters of like famous monsters, kind of. Like the main character is the daughter of Dr. Jekyll from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I know it also draws from like Frankenstein and maybe Dracula. I really don't know a ton, but it just sounds so fun. They're like solving murders in London, which sounds right up my alley. And I'm like, you know what? That's close enough that we can go for it. So that is my pick for this card. Then I pulled the Bard, and the two prompt options for this, because this is a class card, and class cards, I have two prompts I could pick between. The options were either I put my playlist on shuffle and pick vibes based from the song that comes up, or I read a romance. And as much as putting my playlist on shuffle and picking a book based on whatever song comes up sounds like a lot of fun, I already have a romance on my list from a book club, so I've gone with that, and that is A Soul to Keep by Opal Rain. And I'm a little bit scared to read this, but we have learned in the past that dark romance is maybe my thing, based on a very small sample size, so I am nervous, but I'm also looking forward to trying it out. So that is my pick for the Bard. And then finally we have The Fae, which is a person on the cover, and I have gone with A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. It's my favorite Shakespeare fun fact. But to this cover, I actually own two copies, and they both have people on the cover, but I like this one a little bit more because it's pink, but it has Titania and Bottom on the cover, so they're people, kind of. Titania is a fairy, and then Bottom is a human, but he has a donkey head for part of it. I'm counting it as people, so that is my pick for this, and those are my official TBR books for the month of July, and I feel like that leaves me with a lot of room to mood read because two of the books on here are ones I was already planning on reading, and then I just added The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, which I don't think was going to take me a while because I'm very excited to read it. So yeah, July looks pretty wide open in terms of reading, so that's very exciting. But for now, we have come to the end of this video, so if you've enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for more content, and that way I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye everyone!